Okay, we're going. So,
All right.
um, just tell us a little about yourself, how you got started with Willis Music.
Well, my name's Jason Sifford. I have a private studio. I live in Iowa City, and I've been teaching here privately for a little over a decade. And before that, I lived in Texas. I've kind of been all up and down the Midwest. I was born in Missouri and went to school in Louisiana and Michigan, so I kind of consider myself just kind of a Midwestern person and Southern person all around. I got started with Willis Music, I want to say around 2018 or 2019.
Okay.
I had been writing a little bit before that. I hadn't really considered myself much of a composer, like in high school or college or anything like that. But when I started teaching, I started just writing some music for some of my students. Um, and then my wife had encouraged me to, show them to other people, and people seemed to get interested. And then, yeah, when Willis Music um, contacted me and asked me if I'd be interested in doing some writing for them, I jumped at the chance. I'd known Willis for a long time. I think every piano teacher is pretty familiar with Willis piano
Yeah.
music and has had a lot of their stuff in their teaching catalog for a long time. So, no, it was a great opportunity to jump on board and help out.
Awesome. Kevin told me that you're a private teacher at a university.
No, no, I'm independent.
Independent.
So
Okay.
I
What's your
started I started
go
out
ahead.
as a university. I taught in Texas at Texas Tech University.
Okay.
But then we moved up to Iowa, and since we moved to Iowa, I've been teaching privately, mostly out of the house. I've taught a little bit at a local music store. I've done, some accompanying at the local university and things like that. I'm a little bit of I'll do a lot of different things. So I
Okay.
have, I
Very
guess,
cool.
professional ADHD or something. I can't really decide on a particular thing to do.
That's a good thing sometimes, I think.
Yeah.
Are there any other Willis composers that you use in your teachings?
I think I've probably taught something by all of them at some point. Like I've used like dozen a day forever.
Hmm.
So I know that's something, and I mean, I used it when I was a kid. So I continued to use that a little bit. I've taught quite a bit of Randall Hartzell's music. His music has been pretty popular in the studio. Glenda Austin. I actually have Carolyn Miller's new book on the shelf. I was going to talk about it at the MTNA conference next week a little bit.
Very
And
cool.
when I get back from that, I'll have a couple of my students try out some of her music as well. But yeah, I've taught a variety of Willis music for many years.
Very cool. So I know that the book topic um is the John Thompson piano book, doing piano again, I think.
Yeah, play piano
Um,
again.
what's your experience with John Thompson's piano method?
So that's really funny because, like, when I was growing up, we had like in the piano bench, we had like my mom's old piano books, and she had learned with John Thompson when she was a kid. So this would have been like in the
Cool.
1950s and early 60s. And so like the John Thompson books, those like familiar red covers, have
Hmm.
been kind of just a big part of my piano life since I was born, pretty much. So it was really kind of fun when Willis asked me if I'd be interested in helping out with this Play Piano Again project. Because, yeah, I've known John Thompson forever.
Hmm. Um, what what is it like working with the all of the material that he's created?
So that was really interesting because when Willis first asked me to do this, I think the original idea is that we would kind of have a bunch of John Thompson materials and that maybe I would write a bunch of materials to kind of fill in the gaps and go along with it. And the more I got into John Thompson's original materials, the more I started to
Hmm.
realize that there weren't any gaps to fill in. Like his writing was incredible. The interesting thing about the John Thompson method is that it started to get a reputation of being maybe a little dated. You know what I mean? I think
Hmm.
it dates from like the 1930s or something. So it's going on, 80, 90 years old at this point. And, some of the text sounds a little dated, like it was written, that long ago. Um, but the repertoire and the pedagogy and the sequencing are pretty much like evergreen. Like they have stood the test of time really, really well. And so what I tried to do when I got a hold of the materials is I tried to pick kind of best of and tried to make sure that all the pieces fit together in a really logical way. And then I sprinkled in a bunch of advice. And the advice in the book, the text comes from me. I think when you look at the book, it says music by John Thompson and text by me. And so I tried to give like advice on practicing, like, sort of giving students like an introduction to like the theoretical concepts that are more in line with
Hmm.
how we introduce those things today. Um, and so that was really kind of a fun project for me because it made me really think about, how do we think about, practicing and a lot of these concepts differently today. It's not a lot different than it was in 1940, 1950, but there are some things that we do that we've just kind of realized over the years are a little bit different, both in terms of like the physiology of technique and in
Hmm.
terms of how things are sequenced and how people engage with the material. And then it also came at a good time for me because I mostly work with students in school age kids. But I had recently started a few years ago working with 3 adult students. And so I had a lot of conversations with them because I think you'll find that, musicians, we think about music a certain way. We have a certain kind of training,
Hmm.
but amateur musicians or people coming back to it or who are a little rusty on some of the information will think of things quite a bit differently. And so I wrote the text with them in mind, trying to be really less technical, trying to be more of a prose style, a little bit more conversational, and also tried to write in a way that put things in regular English instead of like musicianese. I just, when I looked at a lot of the methods that are on the market, it seemed like all of the methods are just trying to like give enormous amounts of information to students. Like, here's the scales, and here's the chords, and here's this, and here's how this works, and these are the intervals, and these are the sharps and flats, and these are the case signatures. Here's a circle of fifths. Here's a chord progression. Like, just an enormous amount of information. I think most people find that overwhelming, and
Hmm.
they want to just kind of know. So, here's this piece, and it uses some of these ideas, and think about it in this way. And I think it really helps people engage with the music on a more meaningful, kind of deeper level than just kind of like a surface everything kind of
Yeah,
level.
they'd be able to connect with it more.
That's my hope. Yeah, I didn't want anybody to feel overwhelmed. I didn't want
Yeah,
anybody to feel like they needed to know an enormous amount of theory or technique before even, touching the keyboard. So, yeah, I wanted it to be just a really friendly, comfortable introduction.
very nice. Um, who is this book intended for?
So the book, as you probably can guess from the title, Play Piano Again, it's for people who took piano lessons and maybe have a little memory of it, but haven't played in quite a while.
Hmm.
Um, and it really can go with, people who are either like looking for something to sort of teach themselves a little bit and sort of remember is, and it's especially useful if you've used the John Thompson method before. But everything still, like I said, John Thompson is so universal and evergreen. It really will fit kind of anything they've done in the past.
Hmm.
So anybody looking for a book to kind of just grab and sort of pick up as a refresher course, I think also it works really well, if you've got a teacher to help out. So teachers might really enjoy it if they have um, adult students who had piano as a kid.
Hmm.
I think the idea behind the book was that there are quite a few beginner adult methods out there. And there is a John Thompson method for beginning adults as well. Um, but a lot of times I think, and I've used these with adult students before, and you get it and you open it up, and right off the bat, it's teaching you the very, 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 very basics. And I would often like skip 10 pages of it. It's like, oh, you remember a lot of this, or you know what I mean? So we don't need
Yeah.
this. And so play piano again. What I tried to do is like it's divided into four different units. The first unit is all of that basic stuff. And then it just goes over sort of the bare bones kind of things that you need a bit of a refresher on. But then it pretty quickly moves into um, getting a lot of music, a lot of repertoire under your fingers, different kinds of styles and things to play. And by the time you're through the end of the book, the fourth unit, you've basically gone through John Thompson's first grade book, which in piano teacher language basically gets you to about an early intermediate level to intermediate level. And so from there, you can go right into playing a lot of different, original repertoire and arrangements that you might be interested in.
Awesome. Um, I asked all of my questions. Do you think there's anything that I missed or that you would want to talk about?
I mean, let me think. The way I'll say one thing about the book. John Thompson, the original John Thompson method, had this little sort of tagline on it, and it said, something new every lesson. And that's something that I tried to keep. A little bit of philosophy behind the original method I tried to keep, in that every time you learn a new piece or turn the page, there's a little something new for you to engage with.
Mhm.
Um, and again, I find that to be a really comfortable way for people to learn. Um, but because of that, teachers who look at the book and even some students who look at the book are going to notice a couple of things that are unusual. Like one thing that's a little unusual is that there are no dynamic indications in the first part of the book. No piano, no forte, nothing like that. And some people think that that's a little bit unusual. Um, but that was kind of a conscious decision. Like I didn't want people to worry about everything. Do you know what I mean? Like I didn't want
Mhm.
people to worry about what note is this line on the staff and how do I hold my hand and which finger do
Yeah.
I have to use for this and which, you know what I mean? So there are a lot of cases where I didn't worry about some of that stuff because there'll be a piece where like we're going to think about how our thumb works in this piece, or there's a piece and we're going to think about the direction of the melody, whether it goes up and down. So the book is very much step by step that way. Um, and it's my hope that people find that really, really helpful. And also, I do think it is something that sets this book apart from other, theory courses and piano methods that you'll find available. So yeah, that something new every lesson, which I interpreted as like, let's just do one new thing, like maybe
Yeah.
one thing at a time. And again, I was shocked when I really started going through the John Thompson method because that's what he did. And you can actually get really far
Hmm.
just thinking about one thing at a time. It's what do they say? Like the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a
Yes.
single step, right? So it's definitely that kind of idea. You will get your, 1,000 miles in. Um, but yeah, I think when people open the book, they might feel like this doesn't go very fast. And it's like, no, it doesn't. And you really don't need to. You'll still get there.
I think that's why this is the book that got Kevin playing again.
Yeah. I think, I think it's going to be one of those books that especially if you're familiar with John Thompson's, there's a lot of nostalgia involved.
Hmm.
I remember I was online a couple years ago. I'm that piano nerd. I look at like all the piano groups online I've been a part of. And I still remember somebody had taken a picture of a book and the covers had fallen off. So they didn't know what book it was. And they'd taken a picture of a piece and it was like the second page of a piece. So it didn't have a title on it and it didn't have the composer's name, but they remembered it from like 50 years ago when they were a kid learning, and they had written in with this picture on this piano group saying, "Can somebody please identify this for me? Because I love it so much and cannot figure out what it is." And it turned out to be a piece, I think, from like John Thompson's third or fourth grade book at the end, because he wrote some original music for his methods. And he also found some composers who we have not remembered, but who wrote really kind of interesting things. Um,
Mhm.
but I think people will, of course, I put Birthday Party in the book because everybody's going to remember playing Here We Go Up a Road to a Birthday Party when they were, 9 years old or whatever. Um, so I think there's kind of a fun nostalgia element to it too. I know there was for me putting the book together because, I used to do the same. I used to pull my mom's old books out of the piano and kind of tinker around with them. And yeah, like I said, the music holds up. We even like kept some of the original artwork just for fun, which I
That's
think is
cool.
kind of a neat touch.
Well, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it. It was so nice talking to you.
Yeah.
Um, I'm gonna end the recording. Let's see.